All right, guys. Here we are, May the 15th, Friday. This is our kickoff to the long weekend. Some more budget. So I want to welcome everybody and those who may be watching. We're good to go, right, Laura? We're live?
You are live, sir.
So let's do our regular check to make sure that everybody is with us. Councillor Outhet?
I am here. Thank you.
Councillor Russell?
Good afternoon. Yep, I'm here, Mr. Mayor.
Awesome. Councillor Deputy Mayor Blackburn?
Present and accounted for.
Awesome. Councillor Whitman?
Here I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zarowski?
I am here on my third cup of coffee.
Awesome. All right. Councillor Adams?
I'm here, ready to go.
Councillor Walker?
I'm here.
Councillor Cleary?
I am here, Your Worship, and in desperate need of a haircut.
Councillor Smith?
I am here, ready to go.
Councillor Mason?
I'm here, sir.
Councillor Mancini?
Mr. Mayor, I am here. I also need a haircut.
I'll send you over a chamois.
Thank you, sir.
Councillor Austin?
I'm here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nickel? I see her. I think you're on mute, though.
I know, I said I'm here,
There we are.
and then it clicked it off.
Thank you. Councillor Karsten?
Good afternoon, folks. I also need a haircut, and I'm willing to pay $100 for someone's razor because I'd give myself a buzz cut, I think, right about now. Later.
Councillor Hensby?
Present and accounted for.
Awesome. Councillor Stretch?
I'm here, Your Worship. Good to see you.
Good to see you guys. Okay, so we are going to continue, and where we left off, we had we were discussing Brad Anguish was with us. Brad, are you back?
Indeed, I am, Mr. Mayor.
I hope we haven't upset any dramatic family plans for the weekend. I know you had something else on the books. Thank you for coming back. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
And I assume Jacques and John, Laura, Cheryl, Liam, and I'm sure that Brad has some folks with him as well. So where we were was Brad was taking, I think, the last couple of questions, and there may be more from his presentation. The ones I have on the list, we're just continuing, by the way, our budget discussion, so there's no minutes to approve. And there's no other orders of the day, so we'll go right into the budget discussion. I had councillors Outhit and Russell on the list. Please use the chat feature if you want to be added. Councillor Outhit, are you ready to go?
I am, and thank you, Mayor. And I think when we knocked off on Wednesday, we had just put into the parking lot for Councillor Walker's request the sorry, I'm getting an echo back. I hope you can hear okay. That we were going to put in the senior shoveling. So I wanted to put a couple of items into the parking lot for later discussion, but I just want to reconfirm with staff that if they are required. The first one is I'd like to put in about 50% of the stump removal budget, because I'm very concerned that we had finally caught up on Hurricane Juan, but we haven't done any significant cleanup yet of all the stumps left behind from Dorian, and we are expecting an active hurricane season again this year. So the budget, the annual budget's roughly $75,000. I was proposing rather to put in $40K. The other one is I'm very concerned about the the shoveling to be done by hand, the snow removal to be done by hand. For those with accessibility issues. So before, and I think I'd like to put that into the parking lot for discussion as well. But in the meantime, Brad, if you could let us know approximately what that cost is for the shoveling, and if Brad or Jacques or Jane or somebody could let us know if both of these programs need to be put in the parking lot, because I'm still not quite sure how all-encompassing Councillor Mason's amendment was, because both of these I would consider programs. But are they programs that you would like broken out specifically in the parking lot? So those are my questions, and then I'd like to put those two items in the parking lot if required.
Okay, well, I'll lead off. And then let Jane clean up on the procedural piece. Essentially, the 10 winter seasonals have a value of around $225,000. That's the amount for that. And that was coming into this year's budget through our operating cost of capital. So that's that number that's the number for that. And of course, stump removal, you're correct, it's 75,000, and that number comes out of our capital account for state of good repair. I'll turn it over to Jane to cover the process matter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the councillor. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm having trouble with my headset again. Perfect. So the items that are covered off in Councillor Mason's original motion are covered in the sheet that Laura circulated this morning. Right. So we've broken out all of the programs that add up to the $6.5 million that were in the report. And then as well, we've listed out all the grants that add it to 4.8. As Councillor Austin pointed out, there are two items on there that really are compensation. We didn't take those out because then we would have had to adjust the compensation line for that. The most important thing is that they've only been included once. So to your question, Councillor, and to Mr. Anguish's answer, the stump removal would not be included in Councillor Mason's motion because it is either a grant or a program as we've defined it.
Okay, and what about the 225,000 for the shoveling? Because that's staff. That's staffing, as Brad has described, and right now I think we're reevaluating staffing. But do you need this broken out, Jane?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. I think for clarity, it's probably best that we do break it out so that we have certainty. The original motion had an upset limit, I believe, of about $33 million and spoke about bringing vacancy management back to its previous level. So if we have clarity on everything, I think that'll make things easier at the end of the day. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. In that case, then, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to the parking lot $40,000 of the $75,000 that we would normally spend on stump removal. And I would also like to move to the parking lot $225,000 for the hand shoveling of the sidewalks, et cetera, and for the accessible access, largely on the peninsula, I believe, but perhaps we can learn a little bit more about that. But I'd like to move those two items. So $225,000 for shoveling and $40,000 for stump removal.
Okay. So John, just let me ask John Trays, this is the way to do it, to do this and move things to the parking lot?
Yeah. I think, it certainly helps for the conversation that the staff have prepared the list there. And so certainly if Jane's happy, I don't see why we need to drill down to each of those because they're all now on the list, but it's really up to council.
Okay, so that's two items. Perhaps we need to vote on them right now that we're voting on them together unless, is there a seconder for the motion, first of all?
Second, Councillor Austin.
Seconded by Councillor Austin. So are we going to vote on them together, colleagues? Do you want to vote on them separate?
I'm fine with together, but it's up to you.
I think it would have to be separate, Mr. Mayor, depending on how many accumulate, but let's...
Okay. Just trying to save some extra voting, but whatever.
Will we be able to ask questions on them?
Yep.
They will come back as a package at the end of the day if they need to be dealt with, so it might be better to deal with them separately if there's a thought that council may only want to move one as opposed to both.
Okay.
Okay, then I'll move the 40,000 for stump first then, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay.
So for clarification, we're just adding on to the list and we will vote on them separately once the list is completed.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll vote on them separately, but let's have comments on them together. So we can always separate the motion. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my question is to Brad. In this time of crisis that we're under, how much of a crisis is this to leave those stumps there until this is over, to remove them? Because there are other things which are being cut, in my opinion, that are more important than leaving stumps in the ground. Oh, can I have that from Brad?
I'll just, thank you, Councillor. I'll just qualify my answer to say I do not know where every single one of these stumps is, but I would suggest to you that priority one stump removal that is a health and safety concern of a significant nature would be dealt with by our normal course of priority work. So therefore, based on this, I would suggest to you the stumps would wait a year.
Thank you, and I'll leave it at that, and I'll come back on the second part with the shoveling later. Thank you.
No, go ahead, Russell, while you have it. We'll treat it all together and then we'll just split them up for the vote.
Well, I guess I need from Brad a little more explanation on why the hand shoveling is not being done and how much of a priority is that?
Okay, so the cut of the winter seasonals comes by way of our corporate position, which is to freeze all hiring. So that's how that comes about. And so, like I say, the impact is the handwork, and Bev reviewed this at the last meeting, the work that would not occur, detailed work in the core. And basically we revert back to where we were the year before. These 10 seasonals were added last year to up the quality of our workmanship due to the complaints we had received the season before. As you know, it's hard to compare winter to winter and the exact impact, but certainly based on the feedback we have received, the additional workmanship in the core was appreciated.
Thank you for that, and I'll give that some consideration, but I cannot support the stump removal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. And I agree with Councillor Walker with respect to the stump removal, in that I don't see that anywhere near as high a priority as one of the items that we've already cut, which is the bi-weekly green bin. I do see the hand shoveling to be a significant issue, especially when we consider accessibility. We have a number of people who would have difficulty navigating the snowbanks at the best of times, or navigating the streets, and to add a snowbank in the middle of that would make things very challenging for them. And so I would like to see the hand shoveling continue and the snow removal not continue. I'm not exactly sure about the wording of the motion. I just want to make sure that I have an understanding of it. We are voting to remove these items from the budget, so we are voting to remove $40,000 from the stump removal, or we're voting to add $40,000 back in to the budget?
We would be voting to, in essence, cancel the cut, so to put the 40,000 back into the budget that had been taken out on the recast.
Okay, so thank you. I will be voting against the stump removal and voting to keep the hand shoveling. I will have further questions for Mr. Anguish as well, but that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Austin on this.
Mr. Mayor. I just want a little clarity on the sheet that went around what would be included in Councillor Mason's motion around the tree program, planting prunings in there for $1 million. Is there any stump removal that's included as part of that kind of bigger bucket that we're potentially reconsidering as part of Councillor Mason's motion? How does this stump removal relate to the regular program?
And I'll ask Jean to comment if I've got this wrong, but my read of the memo, which I've just got a copy of, it's including the operations programs from the operating budget. So tree pruning and planting are in the operating budget for TPW. Stump removal comes out of our state of good repair budget out of our capital program, which as I explained last time, we took a $1 million cut to a $4 million budget. In that one, comprising that 1 million was the services for the stump removal.
Okay, so in the absence of this, we basically wouldn't be touching any of the stumps unless it was an absolutely critical health and safety situation?
Correct.
Okay, you know, it's a tough year. I can argue myself both ways on this one. The part that sticks with me is that it took us an awfully long time to finish all the stump removals from Hurricane Juan. I mean, we were almost I think 10 years to fully get to them. I'd hate to have stumps left in the right of way for the similar sort of timeline on this one. So I'll hear what the rest of my colleagues have to say. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, anybody else on the amendment? Okay, we're going to vote first of all. The first one was the snow or the stump?
Mike, can I just speak again quickly? And I think, $40,000 to try and get rid of stumps from the hurricane. I was happy bringing that forward. I do think it's a safety issue. I'm more concerned about people falling over stumps even than smelling green bins. But anyway, the big thing, as Sam said, is that we're just starting to get ahead of these, and we've got 150 stumps here and ways. So I hope people will consider even trying to get rid of some of these, because there's nothing to say that we won't have hurricanes and more this year, and we're just going to build a backlog again. And 40K is not going to make a whole lot of difference, I realize. But anyway, I do think that there are health and safety concerns here, and also I just don't want us to build up another decade-long backlog, as Sam said. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't see the motion, but it's the first part of it is the stumps or the snow? The stump, I think it was the stumps, is it? Cheryl, can you help us with?
Yes, it is.
So we're going to split the motion up. We're going to vote on the 40,000 for the stump removal.
Okay. Councillor Stretch.
Against the motion.
Councillor Hensby.
Negatory.
Councillor Kirsten.
No.
Councillor Nicol.
No.
Councillor Austin.
In favor.
Councillor Mancini.
Sorry, Tim, no to the stumps, buddy.
Councillor Mason.
For the motion.
Councillor Smith.
Against the motion.
Councillor Cleary.
No.
Councillor Walker.
Against.
Councillor Adams.
Against.
Councillor Zarowski. Councillor Zarowski. Councillor Whitman.
For the motion.
Deputy Mayor Blackburn.
Against the motion.
Councillor Russell.
Against the motion.
Councillor Outhit.
Even though I'm stumped, I'm strongly in favor.
Deputy Mayor, no, Mayor Savage.
No.
So that was 4 in favor and 12 against.
Thank you to the wise 4.
Okay, that's defeated. We're gonna move.
Now it's snow shoveling.
Snow shoveling, which was 220,000, 225?
225.
225,000.
As long as they don't hit a stump while they're shoveling.
Okay, just a sec. Councillor Stretch, are we okay to still have a conversation even we've split the motion up? John, I can still go to our speaker.
For clarity, so yes.
Okay, on clarity, that's a good point. Steve, Councillor Stretch, you had a question on the second motion?
Yes, and excuse me for chiming in. Just clarity on exactly what the snow shoveling that we're referring to is for. I understood where we were with Councillor Walker's motion for the seniors. What is this hand shoveling about? Who does this and where is it? What's it for?
Okay. It's for, the money would cover employment for 10 winter seasonal staff who primarily do hand shoveling work in the core of the city. This is the detailed work that the machines can't do terribly well with respect to curb cuts, access to pedestrian push buttons, and work in the bike lanes, the new bike lanes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's vote on the snow part of the motion.
Councillor Stretch,
For the motion.
Councillor Hensby,
Affirmative.
Councillor Karsten,
Against?
Councillor Nickel, Councillor Nickel,
There's a delay, my apologies. I am for it, putting it on the parking lot.
Councillor Austin,
In favor?
Councillor Mancini,
In favor.
Councillor Mason,
For the motion.
Councillor Smith,
For the motion.
Councillor Cleary,
Yes.
Councillor Walker,
For.
Councillor Adams,
For.
Councillor Sarowski,
I'm happy to vote for the motion.
Councillor Whitman,
Against?
Councillor Blackburn,
Voting yes for the motion?
Councillor Russell,
For the motion?
Councillor Outhit,
For the motion?
and Mayor Savage.
Opposed?
So
Passes?
Yes, it does. It's 14 in favor and 3 against.
14-3, the motion passes. Okay, so Tim, that's your two motions. Thank you. We have Councillor Russell back on discussion with Brad.
Thank you very much. The next item on my list is the tree planting and pruning. And I'm wondering about specifically about the pruning. We have a cut of $1 million and change. And we have seen some pictures recently, and we've heard some stories about the pruning that would be going around other infrastructure, around the street wires and around other things that we may or may not own. And I'm just wondering, is there, by cutting this pruning, is there any chance of damage to other infrastructure?
That's a pretty tough question, Councillor. It'd be speculation to understand. What I can tell you is what we've proposed is an entire cut of tree planting program. So that's affecting about 1,400 trees that would have been planted. And we're also proposing a 20% cut to our pruning budget. Now, I'll just qualify that by saying our pruning budget was recently increased by Council's budget adjustment list that was just added in the last draft approval of the budget. So, more or less, we've brought that pruning number back down to its previous value of about $650,000 a year. So the program will keep going largely as it has been in past few previous years. So that's the, are we massively under investing in pruning? Yes. But $650,000 has been around that threshold level for the past few years. So the 20% reduction that we proposed was obviously a cost-cutting measure to bring it back to its former level. Okay,
thank you. And just to make sure, because we are looking very carefully at the finances and the prioritization, I would hope that the first thing that gets looked at is where it might be impacting other infrastructure and not necessarily nuisance pruning, so that if someone is getting shadows or overhang or whatever that is, I think, less significant than large trees taking down wires. But I will leave that with you. I'm looking at the capital list, and I just want to make sure that and Mr. Mayor, feel free to cut me off when my time runs out. I'm looking at the capital list, and I just want to make sure that I have an understanding of 3 of the items that are on it, and these are items that have not been slated for cutting. And they are the railway crossing improvements, the streetscaping with no qualifiers after that, and the tactical urbanism. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to those 3 for a few minutes. So once again, those are the railway crossing improvements, streetscaping, and tactical urbanism.
Essentially, the railway crossing improvements, the reason why that's not cut is we have significant compliance requirements to achieve by 2021. So that budget was not proposed to be cut at all. And then in terms of tactical urbanism, that count belongs to planning and development. But I will tell you that because of our commitments, joint commitments between planning and development and TPW to address council's desires and citizens' needs to have the rights of way modified for COVID recovery, that is a large funding source for that. Well, I won't say it's a large funding source, but it is a funding source for that work. So that's that account. And then as far as streetscape, I'll have to defer to Ms. Denty when she looks after that program.
Okay, no, that's super. Thank you very much, Mr. Anguish. That is my set of questions.
Okay. Councillor Austin.
No, he said disregard.
Oh, he said disregard. I thought you were talking about something somebody said. No, I'm just kidding.
Never, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor, just I don't have a question anymore.
Okay. Then I think we're at the end of our discussion with Brad then.
No, I sent my question to the wrong chat line.
How many chat lines are you on at the moment?
Well, there's one there for the staff and there's one for the council. Apparently I went to the staff chat line. My question would be in regards to the Tree Canada program and stuff. Are we having any opportunity to participate with that in regards to getting trees from that national program? I know the Prime Minister announced about planning of how many millions of trees, and I wasn't sure how long that program is lasting for. So are we cutting ourselves out of that program this year if we do this cutback?
Great question, Councillor. Probably going to have to just get back to Council offline. Certainly post Hurricane Dorian, HRM was given the chance to participate in the program, and we have, and we basically encourage them to work directly with the private sector, who also got significantly hit with the tree situation. So that is ongoing. I'll have to get an update on that. As far as what program will be in place for this upcoming year and the size of it, I'd have to get some details and get back to you.
Okie dokie.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Brad, I'd like to thank you and your team for joining us, and I would suggest you reconvene whatever activities you had planned.
All right. I'm sure my family will be very pleased, and thank you very much, Council, for your questions and for your time.
Yeah, we wish you and the family the best for the long weekend.
Stay off the water. Stay off the water.
Yes, will do.
Okay, I think our next speaker, Jacques, is Transit, Dave Riggy. Is Dave with us?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm here.
All right, sir. Do you want to go ahead and give us a few thoughts?
Certainly happy to do so. So good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So before I get into the budget, I did just want to say a quick thank you to all the staff at Halifax Transit. People have really been doing amazing work as we've worked through the past 2 months, and really throughout the organization. But in particular, I wanted to recognize a lot of the frontline staff who are actually out there day in and day out, keeping the city moving under really, really tough conditions. Suffice to say, it's unlike anything we've ever seen before, of course, but I'm immensely proud of how people have stepped up to keep things going. So just really want to thank my team and the all transit staff for the great work. So diving into the budget, I say the good thing about the transit budget is, though it's large, it is a somewhat less complicated than some of the other budgets. But I will go through at a high level the various changes that are proposed. So on the operating side, the first one there, of course, is fare revenue. So a decrease in fare revenue of $20 million. So yeah, I mean, that comes down to a balance, or a combination of both the fact that we're not collecting fares right now, and then an assumption that once we do start collecting fares again, obviously we're not going to get back to our regular ridership numbers this year. I think that's just a reality. So the assumption in the budget is that we do resume fare collection by September 1st. Doesn't mean that will necessarily be the date. That's the assumption at this point. There's numerous things that go into that. Looking at options around barriers for the operators and things like that. That to me would be a prerequisite to start fare collection, and also just looking at what the current state is public health wise in the province. But certainly we are working on that to eventually be able to restart fare collection. The next major category, other expenses, so office building, supplies, services. So that's really just a lot of the back of office stuff, printing, computer software, things like that. Uniforms, would be a bit of a decrease in uniforms with the hiring freeze, hiring fewer staff. Training, travel, and advertising. So the bulk of that is advertising. 75% decrease in advertising, given that we, as I'll get to, we wouldn't be marketing any service changes for August. And then training and education is another big chunk of that budget. And like other business units, we've also zeroed out out-of-town travel and the conference budget. Vacancy rate changes after that. So just a general increase in our vacancy rate from 2.17% up to 4.25%, just based on trends in the hiring freeze. Additionally, we do have sick time savings in there of about $1.2 million. And what that's attributed to is that basically we do have some staff who are out of the workplace for quite a period of time right now, and that's a projection on folks running out of sick time and moving to the EI, or the sick no pay program. Delaying the moving forward together August implementation. So with everything going on, the recommendation is to not do the service increases that were planned for August this year. They would be deferred at this point in time. So that represents a savings in compensation through positions not hired, as well as vehicle expense. The Rural Transit Funding Program. So there's a few aspects to that. A few of them impact Musco specifically around the request to purchase a vehicle, and then increase the grant specifically for the routes that would have been in Cole Harbour out to Porter's Lake. And then there's a general decrease based on projections by the various operators that they will be operating fewer kilometers this year, just like everybody else. People aren't traveling as much. The next one is a reflection of savings through the ferry service reduction. That amount there. And one thing I would say is that there are other savings from that are kind of built into other areas of the budget. In terms of where we've been able to reallocate some staff to cut back on the need for contracted security, contracted cleaning, and things like that. Equipment and building expenses. So there are some fairly significant reductions. It's a bit of an interesting one because we are one of the few business units that is still actually operating a lot of our buildings. But even with that, there has been some reduction in some of the expenses. And I mean, what we'll end up having to do is just prioritize in terms of where the focus is on maintenance. Like, you know, we have things like flower beds at some of our terminals that may just may not get maintained this year. Vehicle expenses, quite a lot of reductions there, mainly in repair and maintenance, spending less on tires. And that really just comes down to the fact that we're running less kilometers and since this has all started. And on a similar note, fuel price reduction. So obviously a big savings in fuel, and that's a combination of the fact that fuel is much cheaper than budgeted and also that we're burning a lot less of it. So that's the operating side in a nutshell. On the capital side, really the biggest thing I would mention is that the tender that council had approved for buses a couple months ago. We found out that the delivery of those buses will end up being pushed out to fiscal year 21-22, and we only pay for buses once we receive them, inspect, and accept them. So from a cash flow perspective, that has freed up cash flow for the current fiscal year, and that has been accounted for throughout the rest of the organization in this exercise. So that's really the high-level overview, and we're happy to take any questions.
Okay, David, thank you for that. We have a few questions here. Councillor Zarowski.
There we go. Sorry for the delay. Thank you, Dave, for the overview. And I guess there are two parts to my question. One is obviously the operations. Can you give us the latest on the reduction in ridership? I just want to be certain about that. Is 80% down a misstatement, or is that roughly where we are?
Mr. Mayor, through you, that's roughly where we are. I think the figures I saw today puts us at about 82% down overall.
Okay, and so we're running basically on a weekend schedule. There are fewer buses running on the roads, obviously many fewer riders, and really we're not projecting a change in that for at least a year. In the factoring of this, I have no problems with the decrease in the operations. I understand that, vehicle expenses, that kind of thing. I guess I want to talk about the acquisition of the replacement buses with the expectation that we are not going to have an increase in ridership substantially over the next couple of years. And as long as we don't have a vaccination program, which is going to be put off, the best guess thinking is till next spring, is it possible that we could divert some of the acquisition funds, make do with what we've got, lower the number of diesel buses, and bring in a little earlier, since we're not getting these buses till 2022, and I hate to think that we'll be driving diesel buses in HRM in the 2030s. And it's a real sticking point for me regarding the capital budget, that we are continuing to go down that road. I understand that we have to build the infrastructure, but does this COVID crisis not present us with a sterling opportunity to begin an early shift towards electrification or hydrogen economy? If you could answer that, thank you.
Go ahead, Dave.
Certainly. So through you, Mr. Mayor. Our budget is predicated on the assumption that although ridership will be slow to recover, that we will return to running something very close to our normal full service in the fall. And I think one of the key factors to keep in mind is that for the likely foreseeable future, even as we run full service, we're likely going to be running at some sort of reduced capacity on board. You know, currently we have every second seat blocked out. That's likely to continue. So even to have a service out there that can even take, you know, 50 or 60% of your normal ridership, you really need to have the full service running. So I guess from that perspective, I would see, as I said when I was here to award the tender for the buses, that the need for those buses doesn't really change. And at this point as well, you know, the tender's been awarded, the purchase order has been cut, and that work is now with the vendor. So certainly, from my perspective, I wouldn't see any reason to change course in terms of the buses that we've already committed to purchase.
Let me go back to your statement that you see ridership coming back up again. What are you basing that on?
Well, what we're basing that on is that, so right now we're in a period of time where almost everything is shut down. All indications that we see is that that's obviously not going to be the case forever, and that what we've seen in other jurisdictions that things are generally starting to open up, and that you will see people back out and around and moving again. So that's, you know, that's the you know, for lack of having a crystal ball in terms of how the rest of this is going to play out, those are the assumptions that we're using and that are being discussed and utilized across the country, that the fall is the point in time where you end up really with the demand starting to go back up.
I'm at a loss. When I listen to Teresa Tam, Dr. Tam, Dr. Strang, they're warning us about a second wave, about what happens when we open up. And in no jurisdiction have I seen a decline in the cases of COVID. And so I seriously question that our constituents, our public transit users would have any confidence in getting on public transit in the way it exists today, and that we wouldn't be stuck with an 80% loss of ridership for at least the next year. And then I guess if you're, I would love to see the sources of how this is based, because everything I'm reading tells me exactly the opposite. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Dave. So just on the service changes, and I'm looking at the table here, with vacancy rate changes, you said that's an increase, I forget the exact numbers, it was 3 or 4 up to maybe 6%. So essentially what you're saying is you have driving positions that are just not full at the moment, and we've had a number of reductions in services. A number of routes have been canceled for the time being, and a number of routes that are operating on a reduced schedule. So even though ridership is down 82%, do you know what the rough breakdown is in terms of time of day? And the reason I ask that is I know at peak hours that buses are having a huge overload problem. And I'll give you the number 9 as an example. In the last couple of weeks, I've had numerous phone calls from many transit riders, many of them actually essential workers, nurses, care workers at the rehab center, care workers at Northwood, who are taking the bus, or actually in several cases trying to take the bus, but actually can't take the bus, but had to call taxis. One story just this week, a woman tried to get on the number 9 at 6:30 in the morning. Or no, sorry, 6:50, and 3 buses passed her by, and by 7:30 she said, well, I'm going to have to take a taxi. So that vacancy rate change, and you had mentioned, you know, the hiring freeze. Transit is an essential service. We are reducing the service at the moment, but do you foresee, and how does the budget take into account that we do need to get the service level up to a point where those who do rely on it, and to Councillor Zarowski's point, there are lots of people not taking the bus right now, not because they're afraid to, but just because they don't have work to go to. And some of them are not taking it because it's been a little bit frustrating. They haven't been able to get on a bus. So given the budget here, what assurance do you have, and is it really baked into the numbers that we can get that service level up to a point where we don't have the overload problems, where we do have the capacity, where we can move people back to work, especially essential work?
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Mayor. So the vacancy rate does not cause me any concern in terms of being able to ramp the service back up. At this point in time, we do certainly have we certainly have plenty of operators. I mean, basically what that, you see, any organization, there's a normal churn, a normal vacancy rate. So ours is just a little bit higher than normal at this point in time. So in terms of the budget, though, our assumption in this budget is that we can go back to full service in July. Now that's not going to happen, I don't think. I'd be very, very surprised. But what it does, there is some flexibility in here. What I see happening is as things gradually start to open up, we're going to start gradually ramping service back up. And I'm confident we do have the resources to do that. We do have the operators. We do have the operators on hand to be able to do that. And specifically around the Route 9, that is an ongoing issue. And we have been trying to fill it with standby buses, but now I do have the team working a way to actually start proactively getting double headers out there for some of those trips that are repetitively issues. So certainly recognize that challenge, and we are working on it.
I appreciate that, Dave. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, a slight delay on the mute. Dave, thanks very much. I love the baseball reference, doubleheader, because one of these days it will be back in play, Dave. Two quick questions. Wrights Cove, I see the $50,000 for the design work is one of the cuts. There's been delayed in Wrights Cove. By this point in time, we were hoping Wrights Cove is going to be, would have been in play by now and operational. So is the simple assumption, Dave, that we just move it up? We're moving everything years ahead with this? If you explain your strategy around that, or hope at least.
Yeah. So yeah, Rice Cove, you're absolutely right. When we, pardon the pun, when we had the moving forward together plan in mind, it certainly included Rice Cove. I think the unfortunate reality with Rice Cove is that I think as council is aware, where we've had constraints around capital budget and things like that. It's just one that has unfortunately fallen to the right year after year, and that's the place we find ourselves in with Wrights Cove. It's certainly still very important. It does serve a important function as a transfer hub. As it is now, we're doing the transfers on the side of the road, which is not ideal. But unfortunately, it's one of those terminals. When we look at everything, it does keep moving to the right.
I just ask you to keep Wrights Cove in mind as we progress into the next year. That whole area is developing even more, as I'm sure you know. There's a second high-rise being built on that site, and so there's more and more residents versus the business side of it. My other question is around the route changes. Prior to COVID-19, there were a number of route changes made and identified that were going to be, I think, launched in August, and one of those is Route 55. And just want to confirm, I didn't see it in any documentation that you shared. I made a message. Is the plan to still have that route change in place at Route 55?
No. So with the recommendation that the August changes be deferred to the following year, Route 55 will not change.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two questions for Dave. On the capital side, and apologies, I can't remember what this item might have been. In the list of cuts, there's new expanded transit center. What exactly is the transit center?
So Mr. Mayor, through you, so that budget was originally there to work towards either replacing or expanding the Burnside Transit Center. So that funding moving forward, what the plan is for that is to actually use that in conjunction with the budget for the Ragged Lake expansion, and that money is actually the differential to move towards electrification of the Ragged Lake facility.
Okay, what does that mean? Because I know the Burnside Transit Center is undersized and also an impediment to electrification, that we have issues there. Where does that put that potential capital project? Because that's a doozy.
Yeah, so you're right. So Burnside's full. So the next step we're taking is to expand the Ragged Lake facility, and that will be our first foray into electric bus facility. And I should note that we do have a staff report coming targeting the last meeting in May to around the rapid transit strategy and the strategy for electric bus. So we'll have a lot more information there when that comes forward. But the and that does speak to Burnside, but the kind of the stopgap before we tackle the massive project that Burnside will be is to expand the Ragged Lake facility.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. The other question I have is with moving forward, and I mean, I agree with delaying it. I mean, we don't have it seems silly to implement this year given everything that's happened in the transit space. What does that mean for the years that were further out? You know, like the Dartmouth Pole Harbor was the very last phase of moving forward and wasn't going to be until 2021, or I think it was even 2022. We weren't going to be getting into that. Is that now also like as a knockdown effect pushed further out, or will the implementation of these phases get more condensed?
I think the best answer I could give right now is to be determined. I think as the CFO and CAO had said at the introduction to this, you know, the overall budget impacts of this are going to be long lasting. So that's certainly something we'll have to evaluate and have those conversations with council in future budget years in terms of what's possible and what can we afford to do.
Okay, to be determined under the circumstances, I think is fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Outfit.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dave. So I wanted to talk a little bit more on the capital side, and I understand that's fine to do. So we're getting sort of different messages. We're saying that we have to watch our capital spending, of course, and we're also hearing that we're hoping that and Jacques has mentioned this a number of times, that we're hoping that the federal government is going to step up and help the provinces, not so much with operating costs, but perhaps with spending to get on shovel-ready projects going. So my question relates to more about where are we if we keep pushing out things like the West Bedford Park and Ride, and if we keep, and I guess I need a status update on rapid transit and ferry strategy. My worry is that if somebody, i.e. the federal government, comes to us and says, okay, here's a package we're launching, here's the next round of PTIP, what have you, are we going to be ready do we have our part of the money, and will we be shovel ready to get West Bedford Park and Ride going at a time when, I mean, it's been shovel ready for 6 years. We've owned the land for at least 6 years. We've been that's grown incredibly at a time when we're looking for ridership, or we will be. So I want to make sure that we're not cutting our nose off this race with not having some money in there towards the Park and Ride. But also, bigger question is, where are we with the rapid transit and ferry study? And is that just assumed that if the feds come forward with money, we'll use the strategic reserve, or where are we going to find that money? We do not want to leave opportunities on the table, any of us, I'm sure. This question just start with Dave, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I apologize. I think I keep talking before my mic's actually on. So in terms of West Bedford, I guess just to clarify, so there was $300,000 that was moved to the right, or I think actually eliminated from that capital account, but that doesn't actually represent any change in the project schedule. That was simply a reflection that we were able to do some of the design internally that we thought we were going to have to farm out. So that's all that represents. There's no change to the project schedule for West Bedford. still anticipating construction next year. On the bigger question around the federal funding, rapid transit strategy. So yeah, so we do have a staff report roaring through the system right now to bring to council on both rapid transit and the e-bus strategy. We're bringing those together as strategic transit projects. And to your point, Councillor, that the timing with all the various discussions happening around recovery funding, anything else like that is good in terms of being able to bring that to council, hopefully gain council's endorsement on that, and then we can go forward from there.
All right, I'm comforted by those comments, and I assume you and Jacques have talked about this at great length, and Jane. So when they come forward, we'll be ready to go. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Dave, for all your work. It's never ending, but I just wanted to and to Councillor Austin asking about the moving forward together plan for Cole Harbour. You know what I've said before, Dave. I'll believe it. I'll believe it when I see it at the end of the day. And it's unfortunate. But you mentioned like the procurement of the buses that was approved by council, that it's being delayed till 21-22, and that there was a cost savings and it freed up some capital. How much was that? Or maybe I missed it in these very tiny little line items that we have.
Yeah, it was around $21 million, I believe, in cash flow. I'm just trying to see if I have that figure handy right here, but and I guess just to be clear, and Jane could explain the pure accounting piece of it much better than I could, but it is a cash flow reduction.
Yeah. That's the only that's where I'm paying attention right now.
Yeah,
I just want to know what the amount.
Yeah, it's around, I want to say it's around $21 million. Sorry, I'm just having a challenge here trying to pull up that file.
So obviously, if you are having a hard time,
20.5 million.
We obviously didn't get it ourselves, so that's why I wanted to ask just what the amount was, because I knew it would be significant and a good help to our cash flow. So, and it's always been about the age of the buses, so we'll just keep using our current fleet until 21-22. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dave, one comment and then 3 questions. First of all, I share Councillor Zarowski's concerns regarding ridership numbers returning to pre-pandemic levels. We know in Cape Breton at CBU, they've gone to virtual classes coming up in September, and people are predicting that all maritime universities will follow suit. So that being St. Mary's, Dalhousie, and the others. So that's a huge concern. I don't see us getting back to normal anytime soon. My 3 questions. You mentioned the ridership numbers on the bus were down 82%. Could you confirm what the ridership numbers are down to on the ferry? That's first. Number 2, if and hopefully when plexiglass shields are deployed, how will transfers be delivered to passengers? And lastly, in pre-pandemic times, what dollar value of transit funding comes from the fare box versus the taxpayer tax rate?
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, the ferry decline is around 94% from pre-COVID numbers. The transfers, the plexiglass with transfers, it's a good question. It's something we're still working through internally to figure that piece out. Okay. And then the cost recovery is around $33 million per year from the fare box.
Thank you. 33 million fare box, and how much from the tax rate?
The remainder, so 100. You can do math here. What's that? 80 million from the tax rate, and there's some, around 80 million.
And so, because of the ridership numbers coming up and the damage to the fare box numbers, that's going to change considerably, correct?
Sorry, what's going to change considerably, Councillor?
I guess that that ratio of fare box to tax rate from 33 plus 80, the 33 is going to go down a lot and the 80 is going to have to go up.
Yes, that would stand to reason.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mason.
Did that work? Can you hear me now?
Good.
All right. I guess the question is when in the next fiscal year things start to change, right? Like I agree, you know, based on I've seen the Rob and Gaynor show 3 times now in the various councils and committees that I'm on, and Sean and I and the CAO saw it, and the mayor saw it last night at the HP Halifax Partnership CAO, and you know, it's not going to be what they think will happen is it's not going to be like it is now, but we're going to have you know, breakouts of the disease 2 or 3 or 4 times. But you know, the idea is you keep hammering that down, and in between those, that you're starting to approach some kind of normalcy. We won't have 100% ridership, we know that, but we probably will have more than 20% for a large chunk of that. So we've got to try and plan around balancing those and maintaining the capacity to respond to increased demand in between outbreaks. So I think what you've got planned so far sounds good to me. Especially because I think more than any business unit, there is nobody, like anybody who says they have a prediction for what your revenue and usage is going to be like in the next year is fooling themselves. We have no idea what's going to happen. And that's the nature of this crisis that we're in. Backing off of the immediate operational concerns and going back into the capital, I think Councillor Austin asked some questions, but one of the key things about delaying, and I kind of missed what you said, I'll be honest, you know, it's hard to stay focused all the time on these video calls, about the moving out Ragged Lake to the right a little bit. Ragged Lake expansion and renovation is a critical part of the phase 1 of what we think will come when the EV bus report comes from your department. So, you know, it's a hard thing to talk about because we haven't seen the EV or bus rapid transit reports yet. So I guess, you know, what can you tell me to give me some comfort that pushing that out a little bit isn't going to hurt our ability to bring those electric buses? Because from what I've seen in advance of that report, I'm actually pretty comfortable with the approach that you've taken, but I feel like this could actually push that whole plan out another year or two. So what are your thoughts on how that's going to impact that?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, so I can actually provide a lot of comfort on that. So it doesn't, so the change doesn't actually represent, I didn't explain this well earlier, my apologies. The change for the Ragged Lake project doesn't actually represent a change in the end date. Working with our colleagues in corporate and customer service who are managing the project, we've come to the decision to change the delivery method from design build to a design bid build to give us, because we've never obviously built an electric bus garage before, it gives us more control over the process. So it represents a change in the when the project will start and when how the cash flows will go, but it doesn't actually represent a change in the end date. So yeah, so I think it puts us in a good place there.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. So I'll end by just saying thank you to you and all of your team, both management and operations, you know, and the maintenance, and of course all the actual operators. Like, it's just been you've been working through a very difficult time, and I think everyone in Halifax appreciates all the work that all of you have been doing. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Russell.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have also appreciated what I've heard so far from Transit with the consideration of pretty much everything. The $20 million, okay, it's moved to the right. It would be nice if that was taken off the table and the electrification did happen sooner, but I completely understand the process, or at least I think I do, and do appreciate that the end date of implementation will not change. My question is around the training. I wasn't able to find training in the original budget that we were looking at a number of months ago, and here we have a reduction in training by a certain amount, and you made reference to that being training of people traveling away. I just want to make sure that that the training of people happening locally, because this is a very specific service. We need skilled operators in order to be able to take care of the buses, and I just want to make sure that this only affects remote training, and it doesn't affect people driving the training buses around the streets of Halifax.
That's correct, Councillor. It wouldn't impact what we call basic operator training, and that's how we train the new folks coming in to do the job of operator. It wouldn't include, there's a certain amount of training in the ferry division, for example, that is required to maintain currency and competency under federal regulations. That's not included. And I think what I'd actually said, there's actually a couple different elements that maybe ran together as I was explaining them, but training and education is a 90% decrease. And then there were two items after that, out-of-town travel, which is fully removed, and then the conference budget, which is fully removed. So any kind of regulatory required training is built into our budget elsewhere. This would be other kind of staff development opportunity training that would be cut.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hensby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple questions in regards to the our bilateral provincial federal agreement, the public transit fiscal breakdown. I don't know what we're getting. There's 17 million, and this year there's 11.8 million dollars in the budget for that, and next year $17 million in the budget, and the year after that for 22-23, $20.5 million in the budget. Are we going to be losing any capacity of using those dollars, or we're trying to use and maximize those as much as possible? My first question.
I have to apologize, Councillor. I'm not. Which fund does that refer to? Is that the gas tax fund?
That's the Nova Scotia Canada bilateral agreement on infrastructure, and there's a section there on public transit. The public transit fiscal breakdown, section 8.2 public transit. There's the public transit, there's green infrastructure, and there's community and recreation.
Okay. Certainly, so through you, Mr. Mayor. So that is, I guess there's two parts to that. One is that there are ongoing conversations, including myself and CFO and CAO with the province in terms of opportunities to move the infrastructure projects forward. The other big thing is going to be, though, when we get the rapid transit and e-bus strategy to council. I think that will form a probably the biggest part of the ask of the federal and provincial governments for that for infrastructure projects. And Jane, CFO, may want to weigh in. To my knowledge, though, there's no expiry date on funds in the current year that's passed by or anything like that.
Jane? Mute. I think you're on mute. You're still not getting it, Jane.
How's this?
Good.
Excellent. Thank you. Third time's the charm. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dave is correct. There is no, through you to the councillor, there is no expiry date, and we continue to engage with the province and the federal government.
So with that, I'm hoping that the conversation or comments that Councillor Out had said, I'm thinking our park and ride terminals, the ones that in Bedford West, the Margison Drive up in Upper Sackville, and I think there should be one over there in the Spryfield area at the end of Dunbrack Street. It used to be Northwest End Drive with the Long Lake Park. These are critical infrastructures we need to build. Plus, we also need one in Mineville at exit 18, and as well as one in Muscataway Harbor. So I'm hoping that we will take advantage of those infrastructure dollars when they're available. I know we're trying to cut back and be lean with the COVID situation, but we also cannot leave any money behind on the table if we can get cost shared for any of this infrastructure funding, especially for public transit services. My other question is with the rural transit funding. We had $400,000 proposed to the budget. It was ideally for the 207 proposal for transit along from Porter's Lake to Cole Harbor via the 207 highway through Lawrencetown and area. We're waiting to hear from any confirmation from the province for that funding they were hoping to utilize is going to be available or not. If we cut up the $400,000 total, we'd be deferring this project for at least a year, but we're waiting to hear what the province is going to do. So I wasn't sure if we're going to reserve any of that money. Like, I think we were hoping to have 200,000 from the province and 200,000 from the municipality, but we just budgeted 400,000 total, awaiting provincial confirmation. But now the province is going through the similar exercise of reevaluating their budget. So if they put the project on hold a year, then I can see us putting our money on hold. So I just want to make sure is that we're not cutting our nose off to spite our face if the province does come to the table with some funding for that 207 transit project. So I just want to make sure that we have some flexibility there if we do have a partner. Any idea how we can possibly reserve that $200,000, or should it make it a motion and just making contingent upon provincial cost sharing as a parking lot item?
Mr. Mayor, through you, so the recommendation in front of council right now does not put aside any money. So if that was a desire of council, that yes, I would say that certainly should be through motion. The other piece of that route as well does it does relate back to the deferral of the Moving Forward Together plan, and I think I might ask Patricia just to step in on this as well. In terms of the relationship between that and the deferral of the changes to Route 401 and the removal of the section through Seaforth out to Back Road. Patricia, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hi, Patricia. Go ahead.
Yeah, Patricia Hughes, manager of planning and customer experience or customer engagement. Yes, Dave Riggy is correct. The proposed recast budget does include deferring the Moving Forward Together plan changes, which means the Route 401 won't change this year, and it would result in an overlap. So we wouldn't be able to fund that portion of Musco's route until such time we're ready to make those routing changes as well. But that's partially the reason why it was removed from the recast budget.
So as I hear that, the 401 service to Seaforth will continue until such time we do have a budget cut or a budget adjustment and or the 207 service introduction, because we're not going to have an overlap of service. One is supposed to be seamless to the other. That was the aspirations we're hoping for. Again, I just want to say is that if the province comes forward with $200,000 for the pilot project, I'm hoping that we have our partnering money to go with it. So I know the budget's talking about a $400,000 cut. I would just like to ask for $200,000 be held on reserve just for the potential partnership. If the province doesn't come forward, then the money doesn't get used.
So David, Councillor, is that an amendment? Is that a proposal for the parking lot?
Yes, please.
Okay, a second for that? Is there a second for the motion?
Nobody wants a bus to the beach, huh?
Okay, hearing no second. Anything else, David?
Not for now.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Dave, for this report and everything. And I do agree with you that come the 1st of September, or maybe sooner as things open up, the buses will be back to use, because I have many, many low-income residents whose only means of transportation is the bus, and they cannot afford a taxi, and they are not going anywhere now. So I would say that, in my opinion, ridership will come back starting whenever they open up, and that'll be for appointments and everything else. So I agree with you. My question is, and maybe I'm incorrect, because I've gone through a whole lot of emails this morning before this meeting. Did I not see a tender for plexiglass shields for buses?
David?
There we go. Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, we have issued a tender for the materials to be able to build the shield, yes.
Good on you. Thank you.
Thank you. The only councillor on the list has withdrawn his question. Going once, twice. Dave, your weekend starts now. Thank you very much, Dave. We know that you've been carrying a big load over the last little while, and you carry it well, and you've had some issues on the personal side to deal with, and we appreciate your hard work and dedication.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Colleagues, it being 2:25 almost, let's take a 10-minute break. Let's try to come back at 2:35 on the dot. We're stopping at 4 o'clock. So we're going to come back at let's say 2:40. We'll come back at 2:40 and we'll go through where I think, Jacques, we have Denise coming up.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
So there's probably no questions about Parks and Rec. That's been pretty easy going for the last 2 months. We look forward to hearing Denise at 2:40. Thank you all.
How you making out, Russell?
We're live.
Good. It's a good sign.
Steve, how's the valley looking for the weekend?
Things are looking good, Mike. The sun's sort of creeping out a bit. People are in good spirits, and yeah, I think it's going to be a good weekend. I'm not going too far. I really haven't left the house too many times, but I might go out and mow the lawn.
And no black flies, right?
They're coming out, black flies.
Are things pretty green up there?
Yeah, greening up real good, actually. Yeah, looking forward to seeing more of it.
Can I just test to make sure you can hear me with my mic off now?
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Laura, can we tell if most of the folks are back?
Mr. Mayor, everyone is back except for Councillor Austin.
Okay. Well, I think we can probably go ahead then. Tell us when we're good to go.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, you can start.
There's some faces I haven't seen for a while. Maggie McDonald and a bunch of others. Colleagues, we're back and we're about to hear from Denise Schofield and Parks and Rec. I think you all know from the calls that we've been having that there's been a lot of activity on the Parks and Rec front, and Denise, you've done an amazing job and we appreciate it. So do you want to take the floor and or the screen and tell us where you think we're going? You can unmute yourself.
No.
There we go.
Let's try that again. I put my mute back on and now it keeps coming off and on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the comments. Yes, it's been busy, and I first want to thank all of the Parks and Rec staff as well as the public for their patience during this changing landscape that we're in this COVID situation. It's been challenging, and our staff are working incredibly hard to keep things moving, and like I say, we appreciate the public's patience. So, as you know, Parks and Rec was probably one of the first areas to hit, and we continue to be impacted by COVID. So overall, the budget adjustments in Parks and Rec are a little more directly related to the COVID situation, where as a result of the health restrictions, we had to cancel a lot of our programs, we had to close our facilities, parks were closed, and that has impacted a lot of our revenue as well as some of our other areas of expenses. So we didn't, unlike a lot of the other business units, we didn't have what I would call a significant external target to cut, but we did have to offset all of the costs that were incurred and the lost revenue. So just to go down and give you a bit of an overview of what the costs are. So the first line item there, the cancellation of spring, summer programming and facilities. When this situation hit in mid-March, that canceled all of the March break programming, that closed our facilities. That was about 2 months ago. And with the continued public health restrictions, we are still seeing impact on revenue. So that number, that roughly 5.7 million, that is all of the revenue that is normally accrued in Parks and Recreation. That's everything from bookings of fields to the recreation programming to the March break camps, aquatics, memberships, any of our facility bookings. So it's all rolled up into that one line item. And as well, we have made some assumptions about return to some of those activities. So we're not assuming any return of of those revenue line items until October. And we've also assumed what I'm going to call a bit of a slow return in some areas. So we've taken a bit of an approach that not everyone will come back to their normal activities, but we are expecting at some point a return to some semblance of normalcy. If there's a significant impact on the number of people that can be in any one of our facilities or any of our programs, that's going to have a further impact. We are assuming some of that in this roll-up number, but not a significant drop in the number of people that can participate. In addition, the next line item under revenue loss, with the situation impacting the overall economy and our events, we're anticipating a fairly significant reduction in any sponsorship of the events that we host. So oftentimes when we're hosting things like Canada Day, NATO Day, there are sponsorships that we receive from companies in the community that want to support those events that we anticipate being significantly cut. The impact of COVID on the hotel market, as I know everyone is aware, is essentially unprecedented, and it's going to have a detrimental impact on the hotel levy that's collected. That amount is split between funding to Halifax, or HRM's destination marketing agency, which is Discover Halifax, as well as to what people know of as MILSR, the Marketing Levy Special Events Reserve, which is what funds a lot of the major events that come to this area. Those two entities will see a reduction in the amount of funding. So typically what happens is there's revenue that's received from that hotel levy that's received into HRM, and then it's literally transferred back out to Discover Halifax. So the two numbers there, the levy transfer under the revenue loss, as well as the transfer to outside agencies under the service changes, that's the in and out. There's a slight difference in the number. That's from the way that the HST is accounted for, but it's essentially the same number. That won't be either received from it by HRM, and as a result, it also won't be transferred to Discover Halifax. And I would just note, it's not on the operating budget. I would also note that, as I mentioned, there's also going to be a comparable hit of that amount to the MILSR reserve, which, like I say, doesn't show up in the operating budget, but it is in the reserves. So the overall, the impact generally to the Parks and Rec revenue is about just over 8 million. That has been offset with the service changes and the other mitigations that are listed there. So in terms of cancellation, spring, summer program, facility closures, that's, as council is aware, we had to not return a number of casual staff, seasonal students. That is rolled up into that number. The bulk of those people that were not essentially laid off, I guess, to use a more general term, fell under the Parks and Rec business unit. So, though that's a significant number of that amount of money. As well, there's also, without having programs, we don't need as many supplies. So that amount was actually slightly over 4 million. For the purposes of this budget, and with parks being reopened, as we are working through this, the province changed the state of emergency to reopen parks. We've rolled that back to 4 million even. That gives us a little bit of buffer to be able to make sure we're able to maintain those parks that have been reopened. So we're just working through that now. As well, the next line there, events and grants, there's a couple of things that happened in this roll-up account. So with the restrictions, we won't be able to host events this summer in the same way that we've always hosted. So the large parades, concerts, those kind of thing, we will not be in a position to host those. We are looking at ways that we can do virtual events so that citizens are able to celebrate milestones and big anniversaries. And we'll have some more information on that in the hopefully not too distant future. But because we won't be hosting events the same way, we have reduced the funding for essentially the summer events. We've kept a little bit of money for some virtual events. We haven't cut all event money because we are still, I guess, optimistic and hopeful that we'll be able to do some events throughout at some point within the fiscal year, remembering that this is for the full fiscal year. So this would cover the rest of the year, New Year's Eve, tree lightings, those kind of things. And like I say, we have some money left aside for some virtual events. What the other piece that is in that line is our grant program. So council would be aware that in addition to the MILSR grants, which as I mentioned, are not in this budget, we also provide annually events to community celebrations that it's in the regional events administrative order. That has been reduced by 115,000. So there's about 100,000 left in that. What we've done is all of those small community groups and events that typically are held in the summer months, we've reached out to those organizations and asked them whether or not they're exploring virtual events themselves. And if they are, we've asked them to resubmit applications so that we can consider some level of funding for them. So that, I guess, reforecasting of that work is happening, but that budget has essentially been cut in half. Similarly, the cultural showcases funding is also in that same bucket, and we're asking the same things. That has been cut from 200,000 to 100,000. We have council had in the BAL, in the budget adjustment list, had increased funding to the professional arts grant program. That money, the equivalent amount of that money, which was 125,000, we've reduced that as well. What we're thinking about there, we've left, so that would essentially mean that the professional arts grant program that we're offering this year is with the same amount of funding that it's had previous year. Coincidentally, the amount of money that council increased is pretty close to what tends to be issued in what we call project grants. Those tend to be grants that bring people together in gatherings. So what we're going to do by reducing that amount of money, we're really going to focus the professional arts grants this year on what we call operating funding, because we think that's going to have much more of an impact on those arts organizations. And the project grant funding, the stuff that brings people into events and gatherings, is likely not going to be able to be used anyway. So that means that professional arts grant program will proceed this year with the same amount of money as last year, with the reduction being what council was going to add to it. And I'll just make a note here, just again, as much for any public, the public that are watching. So on Tuesday in council's budget or council meeting, you passed the new administrative order that impacts the grants programs and the way that you distribute those funds, so that they're not going to be going through the grants committee and special events advisory committee because of the impact of COVID and how we have to change our meetings. Also in that administrative order, we waived the requirement for peer jury review of the public art process this year because of the delay in getting the budget passed with COVID, as well as the challenges just bringing people together to review applications and doing all of the reviews. We included in that document the change such that those grants won't go through an external peer jury review. They'll be reviewed through staff and administered directly this year, so that we can get those grants finished and out the door as fast as possible without having that additional step. So then the next line item there is this transfer to Discover Halifax. So those are the service impacts. In terms of other mitigation, Parks and Rec, we have increased our vacancy management. This would put us about 8% vacancy management, which is high. However, we have 23 vacancies right now. We have indications that we're going to have some more retirements coming up because of certain groups in our department. We have folks close to retirement. So we feel that we're going to be able to make that vacancy management fairly easily with the hiring freeze that's on now, the number of vacancies we have, and the potential for retirements coming up. So that has been increased. The other compensation budget mitigation, that's things like overtime reduction, the stipends and the honorariums that are provided to the Youth Live participants. We finished our most recent Youth Live cohort. We're not going to bring new youth into a program right now because it's too challenging to give them meaningful experiences. So that would mean that we would have a reduction in the number of honorarium stipends that we have to issue. So that's that number. And then the last number is essentially a roll up of all of the little things, office supplies, training, travel, all of those just general cuts that we have implemented to be able to get to the bottom line that we had to meet. So that essentially, I will just mention also, we do have capital that we have adjusted. I won't go into huge details. I will say that we've cut, or we're recommending about $2.5 million in parks capital project reductions. We essentially, similar to, I believe Mr. Anguish described in TPW, we're essentially tendering year round. But because of Nova Scotia winters, sometimes that means that even though we've tendered a project, it doesn't get built within a certain actual construction year. So we've looked at projects to see if there are any that may be delayed because of environmental permits, land issues, potential American distributors or specialized forces or workforce that has to come in to do certain projects. So any of those projects we're recommending that they get deferred. That's that 2.5 million. That's going to help with the whole cash flow situation. We are still tendering. We're about 45% tendered at this point in time, which is typical for us, which considering we've had to shift everybody to work from home is a good thing that we're still able to keep those going. But we have recommended, and that's in the capital budget that you have, about $2.5 million of projects that would get moved out, so that opens up that capacity. So that's essentially a very quick overview of what was in that one roll-up slide, and we're available if council has questions. I'm sure you do.
Okay, Denise, thank you very much. We will begin with Councillor Samuel Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Denise, and your team for all the work that's gone into just keeping things running in this crazy time. Certainly Parks and Rec has been on the front lines of a lot of it, and I know it's been very challenging. I have some questions. The main one that I have, and I think it's about to become even more timely, this question. If the province reopens beaches this summer, right now, it's my understanding we don't have anything in the budget for lifeguards at any of our HRM supervised beaches.
Beaches roll tomorrow at 8 o'clock.
You can't steal their thunder, Councillor. So the beach piece, like there's nothing in the budget right now to supervise any of the beaches that we would normally supervise, correct?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. So when I said that we rolled back the cost savings to the 4 million, that's to give us a little bit of capacity to be able to bring back some seasonals, some seasonals in parks. We don't have a direct line item for beaches at this point in time, but that's one thing that we would be looking to need if the province reopens beaches. We don't know if that will be the case because of distance, social distancing and whatnot. But if that's the case, we would look to use some of that money that we have rolled back to see how many that we would be able to bring back.
So you don't need anything, because like this is one that I'm really concerned about when we get to August and it's 20, 30 some odd degrees. And if we don't have the beaches supervised and they're officially reopened and the parks are reopened, I mean, to be blunt, I'm worried that we will have a rash of drownings in the municipality if we're not prepared for it. And also the testing program for testing the water quality if people are going in. I think that one is part of Councillor Mason's motion, so that's covered. But so you don't need anything from me. You already have a bucket of money there that can be used for this if we get the word that the beaches are going to reopen.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I will not make a motion then if we have money set aside for that. But I do want it noted that that is one that I'm really concerned about. On the capital side, and it breaks my heart. I think Mr. Mayor Jacques wants to speak.
Go ahead, Jacques, if you want to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to point out, and Denise may not be aware of this, but Strang issued an order today reopening the beaches and tennis courts to a certain limit.
That was
He
still.
hasn't said it yet.
No, that was confidential.
Yeah.
He has not said it.
I'm sorry, but it's probably going to say it, and he's probably either saying it or about to say it. So it's
Yeah, it's in writing.
writing it.
I was trying to dance around it, everyone, but I guess knowing it's coming, we had our usual 15-minute notice, right? So, you know, some things, such as the challenges we live with. So, given the beaches are reopened, we really need to have staffing ready to go there, in my opinion. I think it's a matter of public safety. It's also a matter of just mental and physical well-being. So, if I need to make a motion on that, I can, but if I'm hearing that we as a municipality, that would be a priority, then I'm fine with leaving it as is.
Yeah, no, so what I would work with the CAO obviously to look at having those particular positions removed from the hiring freeze so that we could get those positions back.
Okay, and then the other one, of course, is the, but I think it's covered in Mason's motion of the lake water testing, because if the beaches are reopened, we also need to make sure that the water is safe. Yeah, so I would recommend that. That's actually in the planning and development budget, Councillor. So when Kelly's presenting, I think it's on maybe Tuesday, that might be, you can probably put the motion on here now, but it's probably more directly linked at that point. I can wait till Kelly's in. I don't mind that. The capital side, the splash pads, losing them breaks my heart, although I do recognize the situation we're in. If we do get money from the feds that comes in, do we have any sort of sense as to where these sorts of things might fit if we do get stimulus, if there is aid that arrives, what we would be looking to do with that money? If we were to, so I guess the council motion on splash pads for that particular, I know the one you're talking about, is that the full funding has to be realized. So the fundraising from the community group as well as the municipality. So if we were to get federal money, and I know that you know we're looking at every list, it would all depend on what is, you know, what criteria is met, what projects meet the criteria. We would certainly, you know, I'm sure, not to speak for Jane, but I'm sure any and every amount of money we're able to get, we would get. So if we're able to get money for splash pads, we would look to get it. Okay. I'm not going to advance it now. I realize it's a heartbreaker for a lot of folks. And, you know, I think that we probably need to have some more conversations offline with the community group about what fundraising is realistic in the environment that we're in. Because I know one of the challenges they have is, you know, it's a bit of, well, who's going to guarantee first, right? So I'll leave that one for now. Last question, the green at the Dartmouth Lawn Bowls, that one's delayed till next year. There might be some advantage to doing that this year, given that the club can't operate really right now. I mean, you can't have gatherings. So if money could come in, I would hope that might be one that you consider putting back into the mix. Just, it has been planned for years, and if you're going to do it, this is this season would be the least disruptive because there is no season. So that's correct, Councillor. I guess what I would say, one of the reasons that we put that on the list is that it does require specialized labor, and we're not sure if with the borders being closed, whether the labor would be able to come, you know, from out of province kind of thing. So that's one of the reasons we put it on the list of potentially, if we can't get it done this year because of some of the restrictions, that we wouldn't want the money to be sitting there and not being able to be used. So that's, you know, certainly if you put it back on, we'll do our best to get it finished or get it done, but that might be a challenge depending on how the restrictions play out for the rest of the summer. Well, I'm not going to advance it right now. I think it's one that I think we should hold on the radar for if federal aid eventually comes in and we're looking at putting money back into capital. It would be near the top of the list because I think it's an ideal time to replace it. Labor challenges accepted. So that's the end of my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Denise, I want to thank you and all your staff for all the prompt attention that you've given to my problems in the district and getting things ironed out. My main question is that I know it's not going to happen tomorrow or whenever, but when rinks reopen, are we laying out guidelines which they must follow to open, like safe distancing and everything? And if not, can we get started on that so when the rinks do open, that the rinks will be able to accommodate people and be ready for it?
Absolutely. So, Mr. Mayor, through to the councillor. So that's all of the sport organizations are working on their essentially return to normal programs, what that looks like, dressing rooms in the case of rinks, whether or not they can have games, whether they have smaller games. So we're engaged with Sport Nova Scotia organizations on all of the different kinds of sports and how those can get back to some semblance of normal. So you're right, it's not here soon, but before we'll know it, we'll blink and we'll be into the winter months. So that is, hockey is definitely one that is working with us, and we're on what that is going to look like.
I just want to make sure that when it does open, that the facilities are ready to take them, so they're not scrambling to do things which they could be doing now. Thank you.
Yep.
Good, Councillor Walker. Thank you. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 3 quick questions. I think, like everybody else, thank you, Denise, for taking the brunt of early COVID. You and your team, all your workers, keeping 108 outside, both in DPW, your outside workers in parks. I mean, it's been amazing seeing the amount of work that they've done and how dedicated they've been. To build on what Councillor Austin said, a little worried about not just the having lifeguards. I also noticed water testing at beaches is on the list. So if those are going to be open, it's probably not good enough to say to the public, we don't know, take your chances. So I think we're going to have a look at that. But my 2 questions for you are around, you've said that you're looking at alternatives to summer programs. I assume on kind of more on the ones that we can do a cost recovery basis for. There's a lot of questions about that from the public. How do we turn that around if and when Dr. Strang and the province say that kind of thing can be open? They are looking at daycares and other kind of childcare right now, but they haven't decided on that yet. And so what does that look like if in a month we don't have any kind of second wave and 28 days have passed and they're saying those things can open? Certainly what I'm hearing is that some of the private and not-for-profit organizations are planning, if allowed, to offer these things. So that's everything from the WAG to the universities. So we're getting those comparisons, and I'd like some words about that. And then the other thing that I think was touched on in your presentation is we're obviously expecting Milser to drop to nothing, right? I mean, there's I don't even know. I know that they're at about 15% occupancy right now, and it's all hospital workers and people who are have accommodation challenges. But it's not going to be anything like we'd projected. Is there any money in that reserve, or is it depleted from last year? Because my concern has started to turn to, just in the last couple of days, haven't had a chance to think about it until now. Is there any capacity to have a stability program for both Destination Halifax and the events we used to support? We're not going to give the Jazz Festival or whatever, the $100,000 they normally get or whatever, but we still want them to be there in 2021 and 2022. So is there any money there at all, given that we know no money's going to come in, or very little?
So I'll start with that one, Councillor, just because it's top of mind. There is some money. So if you recall, Council directed a few years ago, I forget when, that money be put aside for major hosting bids. So that is around 660,000, I think, is the number that is in that. So it's certainly not what it was intended for, but what it is. There is still the balance of that reserve is about 1.4 million, but about 7 something is already allocated to some of the events that you've already approved, or it's the remaining amount. So what's left is about 660-ish, and that is allocated for major bids. But of course, as you know, council has the authority to make whatever decisions it chooses on that money. So staff right now are working on a revamped report about the Milser events to bring that forward. It'll be to council, obviously, with the changes away from special events advisory, with some recommendations as to how you may be able to, what you may be able to consider for events that come out of that reserve. To your point, normally between Discover, Halifax, and Milser, it's close to 3 million. We're hearing it's, you know, in a couple 100,000 that potentially could come in. So it's a dramatic drop. So it will not be the funding levels that we've had in the past, but certainly we want to be able to bring a report back that gives council with as many options to consider as possible. In terms of alternate summer programming, everything that we're hearing right now is that social distancing and some degree of restrictions will remain. So right now it's 5 people, non-essential. If that goes up to 10, we will not be able to do what I call the traditional summer day camp situation, because those can have upwards of 20 participants. The biggest challenge for us, and we know that there is talk of daycares going back in. The biggest challenge for our programming is that they're run by youth leaders, so students, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. That's a very challenging and situation to ask youth to manage through this situation. We would not be in a position to be able to, if, you know, as I said last night in the email, even if all the funding was put back and all the restrictions were reduced, we wouldn't be able to get everybody back in time and get them all properly trained for, you know, an end of June, early July. We are looking at what options if the summer, if restrictions are reduced, so that we could have, you know, a partial type of camp, but our other focus is, pardon me, is what other activities can we do? So lots of virtual activities, lots of really focused on family type events that they can do in our parks, whether those are, you know, nature walks, scavenger hunts, those kinds of things, and really try and get some focus on that. We're also looking to expand our offering of the mobile rec van that some of you would be aware that's comes around to different communities. We're looking to get some access to additional vehicles and bring actually the rec centers into the communities. So, but the challenge is going to be, we can't have, you know, 50 kids showing up, because again, we won't have this, you know, the support systems, the, you know, enough staff to be able to manage that. So we're looking at what can we, you know, what can be done, how many, what kind of registration would have to happen for that. So we're exploring all of that right now to be able to get as much recreation out into the community, more play boxes, all of those things, so that kids do have options for the summer, but we won't be able to offer the traditional day camp structure that we have in the past, that, you know, because those are underway typically now. Those are all registered now, that kind of thing.
Well, thank you for that. I think that provides clarity, and I'll talk to you offline about Milser, because I have a couple ideas about what I'm hearing the need is. But thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Denise, as many have said, thank you to you and your team. I know you know, there are people that suggest some of our staff aren't working very much at home during this, and we know how much you are, and many of your staff are, and the folks out in the parks, just amazing work. So thank you, Denise, so much. My first question was already answered by Councillor Mason. I had questions about Milsner, and maybe Councillor Mason, I wouldn't mind chatting with you about that also with Denise. I would not. My only other question, it has to do within HRM. We have, I think, approximately about 10 pump tracks. Those are the bike tracks that we have amongst our area. I know that the deputy mayor has one in her area, and I have them in my area. My understanding, the budget cuts are showing no maintenance to these tracks. And my concern in talking to people that are in the know about these tracks is that as they get used and they deteriorate, if not regular maintenance goes on it, what happens, a lot of the users of the pump tracks will do their own maintenance. and they're concerned that they may not do it to a certain standard, and it may also cause a risk. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that, or if you're aware of that, or if staff looked at any possible risk to have these pump tracks not being under maintenance, proper maintenance.
Sure, Councillor, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. I'll start. I believe Ray is on the line. I'll just ask him to jump in once I finish for any specific details, or if I miss it. We have not cut the funding for State of Good Repair, so there is no intention to not do the maintenance. You know, certainly we have some partnership groups that we will be getting those partnership agreements finalized and funding once the budget's approved, but there is no plan to not do the maintenance to any of our assets. Ray, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ray Walsh, Parks Manager. No, Denise is correct in her analysis of the pump tracks. We will be continuing to maintain those as per usual. There's been no cuts.
Great. And Ray, to you, thank you as always in normal circumstances, but you and your team during COVID-19 have outstanding also. So I appreciate that, Ray. Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitman.
Thank you, Mayor Savage, and thank you, Denise, and your team. I'd like to echo Councillor Mancini. Thanks to many HRM staff that are working from home and are working. Thank you to them. Denise, since lifeguards require direct contact with their customers, will HRM lifeguards be provided PPE? And will swimming lessons be available at all this year? And finally, can we have a budget update on Goresbrook Park?
Okay. Yep. So you're correct, councillors. So what the restrictions have said that, you know, from in emergency situations, the social distancing doesn't apply, because obviously life safety is more important. We would be getting, you know, whatever PPE is needed. That's exactly what's being worked on in HRM right now for those kind of activities. We've got PPE for our you know, park staff as needed. So what we'd be reviewing that with the Nova Scotia Health Authority, whatever PPE is needed for lifeguarding, we would ensure we have that for our staff. Swimming lessons, that's one of the questions that we are discussing with the province, because at this point we're not anticipating that our outdoor pools will be able to be open this year because of the nature of what swimming is, with you know, trying to keep you know, I guess there's no other way to say it. When people dive underwater and they come back up, they're often coughing and sputtering, and that's a challenge. We are not at the position to reopen our facilities, so that means until that's able to be done, the pools inside our facilities are not able to offer swimming lessons either. So we're not able to confirm at this point whether there will be, when we be back to swimming lessons. Based on what I had indicated with our revenue, we're anticipating at this point return to what I would call regular activities in the fall. But as you all know, as things change, we try and adapt as much as we can when changes are made to the state of emergency order. So if that was to come on board, then it's certainly something we would look at and see if we could offer some. I guess what I want to ensure that council and the public are aware of is, if restrictions on the number of people stay in place for you know, any length of time, we will not be able to have the same number of people in any swimming lessons or any fitness classes or anything. So there will be challenges for people to get into our programs potentially. So we're going to try and offer what we can as we're able to, as things return to normal. Goresbrook Park, there is no specific budget line, capital line item at this point. So I believe, are you referring to the park master plan that came back, councillor, and any funding for that, or is there something specific, something else?
No, that's right. And I think we set aside $3.5 million for the washrooms and lighting and benches.
We haven't set it aside. That's the estimate. So all of those park plans will be as we do future capital budgets, we'll be bringing those projects forward. So that's the estimate that we have right now, but that will be prioritized with future capital budget. So it's not in this year's budget. It's not, there's no funding allocated this year.
Thanks, Denise. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and again, thank you, Denise, and all your staff. If I could send you a bottle of positivity for your composure during announcements, I would. So I might have to
my
get your.
phone is blowing up, so Beaches was just announced right now.
Right. All right. So you'll get two bottles of positivity
Yes.
in the mail. So I had two questions. One was addressed. The only thing is related to recreation programs for the summer. So understanding that we're looking at now doing that. If there is an announcement, and even some of the information that Dr. Strang has given, talking about programs happening in the summer at universities and other places and possibly daycares, do we have, same as with the lifeguards, do we have money aside just in case we were to look at maybe for running skeleton crews or even using some of the current programmers that might be working, or even maybe last year's programmers who have experience? Are we looking at doing things like that if we decide to run some summer programs just to get something running in communities?
So if we were able to offer anything, it would be with our permanent staff. So right. When I indicated the bulk of the staff that were not recalled were in that recreation program. We have, well over 1,000 summer program camps. And those are typically, like I said, the 16, 17, 18-year-old youth that are doing that. So that number is a good chunk of that 4 million that was there. So we don't have that amount of money. No, we have, like I said, when we pulled back some money, we were thinking if beaches open, we have to have lifeguards, and we need to be maintaining the parks that they have reopened. So that's the money that we asked finance to give us back. So, and Jane graciously did. So if we were to, if the opportunity came to do any kind of summer programming, it would just be as we were describing there, with using our permanent recreation coordinators. It wouldn't, right. We wouldn't have the broad-based day camp programs that we have had in the past.
So you wouldn't need no extra money to do that?
Not to do with our current permanent right. staff. If you wanted us to look at something other than that, then yeah, we would need additional money to do something broader.
So if we wanted to do like a small amount just for if we decide that we want to run that, is there a number that you think could be, and this might be a hard one, maybe this is something that you can come back to us with. Mm-hmm. Like, do you think there's a number that would give you very basic coverage, maybe like for each rec facility to handle one program or two programs a week? Is that something that you think would be worthwhile looking at, or just we should just say, you know what, summer programs are not happening and let's leave it at that?
I think it would be very challenging to have one or two people per facility, because when I say that we have about 14,000 kids who participate in our right. summer programs. The only, we would only have a very few, especially if restrictions are that there's only 5 or 10 people. If you had 1 or 2 program officers, we're looking at 8 kids, 8 children.
Yeah.
So I think we can have a bigger impact with other activities that kids and families kind of do on their own. I think we can have a bigger impact with these mobile vans, rec vans, and taking the rec centers out into the community.
Right.
That I think we would have a bigger impact.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor. Yep.
Okay. No, I'm not Kreskin, but I'm sensing splash pad. Councillor Stretch.
Well, maybe you were Kreskin, Your Worship. Yeah, I guess a couple of things. I know different than Sam and a few others. Yeah, it breaks my heart that we're likely going to have to put a big pause on the splash pad initiative, especially this one that we've been working hard on out here in the Musquodoboit Valley. And I understand that, and the community accepts that. I guess my question to you, Denise, and by the way, I want to echo others' comments. You've done a great job through this, and your voice brings great confidence in our discussion. So thank you for that. But I just want to ask, we've worked kind of hard to get this little community on the list. When things clear, I don't have to start all over again, do I?
So we still have the motion from council on the acquisition of land. So that actually, we're working on that because that's a remittance back to council.
Yes.
Whether I wouldn't say you have to start all over. Obviously, from Parks and Rec point of view, any of the projects that we've deferred, obviously, if we had them on the list, we still feel that there's a need to do them. Obviously, what I need to say is, as I see Jane's face looking at me, is, that's always going to be subject to the next budget deliberation. Council will determine what projects it decides on its next council deliberation, but certainly any projects that we would defer this year would be, from Parks and Rec point of view, important and on the list for next year.
Wonderful. Well, that's good news, and I could see Jane's face as well. I knew that she'd.
She sat forward, so she was going to jump in if I didn't say that, I think.
I could tell. Okay, well, that's great. At least the acquisition of that small piece of land, which I as well understand is still in progress, will be moving ahead unless council says otherwise. So I'll leave it at that, but I accept where we are and appreciate the challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. And again, I would like to echo what everybody has been saying about the work with Parks and Rec. People in Lower Sackville absolutely appreciate everything that happens around here with respect to First and Second Lake Park, the Met Field, everything else that has been opened or closed, or I think we now have that settled, and I appreciate your patience and your determination in being able to sort through all of the confusion that related to that. I was having a look at the budget, and I appreciate that you had mentioned community events earlier. And I think everybody here knows that my background has been strong in the community, especially around those events that relate to Canada Day. And so we have Lake Park, the Met Field, everything else that has been. There seems to be an echo. I think we now have that settled. Okay. So everything related to Canada Day, and with that, if I'm not mistaken, the community events budget that you described earlier has basically been cut in half, with the expectation that a lot of the events will be eliminated or reduced. And I have no doubt that a lot of the events will be eliminated or replaced. So what we are looking at here is not our normal parade and concert in the park and fireworks and a whole bunch of other events, but what we're looking at is a drive-in movie theater, as you might have gleaned from my motion on Tuesday earlier this week. And so what I'm wondering is, if we restore, if I'm not mistaken, it's $225,000 for the total community events budget, but there has been $115,000 decrease in that, taking it to $100,000. We don't know what the events are going to be, and people will have to reapply for the money, and it's not going to be like other years because we know what the events for the previous years have been, but this year it's going to be completely different, and there are going to be additional protective measures. What I'm wondering is if that $100,000 has been spoken for really, and would it make sense to increase not the spend, but at least holding the money in storage through at least Canada Day to consider for later on? So I'm wondering if it would make sense to restore that budget by $115,000.
So thank you, Councillor, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Councillor. First of all, Councillor, just because it's while you said it. So thank you to all of the councillors who are thanking me for. But I just want to say, I'm the face here on this screen. The Parks and Rec staff are working extremely hard. They're the ones who deserve the thanks, because they're the ones out in their parks and trying to get things reopened and closed and whatnot. So I thank you on their behalf. You're right. So the community events, that's what the money that is allocated through the regional events reserve. That hasn't been allocated as of yet because that report comes back to council. Normally it goes to the grants committee first, but it'll just be coming directly back to council. My team is actually reaching out to all the event organizers to find out. It's about half right now are just canceling outright. About a half are looking to do alternate programs for Canada Day or other events that happen throughout the summer. So those conversations are happening. We will be bringing that report back to council once we get all of that information back from the groups, and it will be council's decision as to whether or not to who gets that money and how much. Whether or not that amount gets reinstated, I believe, and Councillor Mason and Jane can correct me if I'm wrong, based on the motion that Councillor Mason put on the floor, whatever day it was, Wednesday, I think if by grants, I think it was all encompassing of all grants. So if that's the case, and he's nodding, then that would get, when council deliberates on that report, that will determine whether or not this particular program goes back to full amount. I don't think you need to look at that separately.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I appreciate again that although the number of events will be less, the format of those events will be completely different. Correct. And the structure of them and the protective measures that are in place will be completely different. So we don't know what the cost is. We can't, it's not an apples to apples comparison. And so I appreciate your comments on that, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I know, Denise, you're the face on the screen, but given that things are changing all the time, it's good that you're a little bit darkened out so we can't quite see your full reaction.
I'm in a room with like bright windows. I realize as I'm looking here, I look very,
but it's good. Given what just unfolded and what you found out while you're on camera. So I just wanted to, I guess, pick up on what Councillor Russell was just saying with regards to events. So regardless of whether these community events are a 3-year secured kind of granting, that is still in jeopardy and going to be revisited. So, and I just wanted to get
that's based on, while they receive the funding, it's always based on council confirmation through your budget process.
Correct. And so, and with regards to the grant, still you're not responsible for the museum grants though, are you?
No, that's through finance.
Through the grants committee, right? And the other thing was the multi-district facilities. Like there was a big media story on last night with regards to how they're all hurting, and I just wondered how those were captured in this budget going forward. Like, how are we treating those, especially those that are operated by a board, like the Sportsplex and Cole Harbour Place, and I know the Sackville Stadium is HRM. So I just, as a means of trying to understand how it's going to be presented on this budget, how it's going to look. And to Councillor Russell's point, as things are changing all the time, I'm sure there's a contingency within the budget to, for us to provide the restrictions that are going to be put in place as we slowly open up. I'm sure that that's already taken care of in the budget. You can confirm.
So in terms of what I'm going to call our partner facilities, so multi-district facilities, but we also have some of the smaller facilities as well. So we have the contribution fund for the smaller facilities and the large MDF, as we call them. Their budget, they receive subsidy based on their budgets that have been submitted to HRM. They're not directly, they're in the roll-up of council's budget, so they're not in the individual business unit line item by line item. So you have the subsidies that you were about to approve at the end of March are still allocated in the budget. What we're working with, the team is working with those facilities to ensure that they don't run into cash flow problems right now. But as soon as the budget is approved as well, those subsidies will be rolled out as well. And if they run into challenges, so if they end up with a deficit at the end of the year, as an HRM facility, that's an HRM deficit to absorb. So we're working with them to ensure that, we mitigate costs and whatnot as much as possible, but we recognize that is very likely to happen in some certain cases.
Yes, because I'm sure if they'd known COVID was coming, the subsidy would have been a lot larger. So, yeah. Okay. And so you are, well.
Oh, sorry, the restriction. So
yeah,
so we're certainly, facilities looks after our buildings. We look after the park. So similar to the work that Dave is doing on buses, we're certainly looking what is it that we are going to need to do in our facilities. Part of that challenge is related to what activities will be allowed. So as we continue to get more information as to what activities will be allowed going forward, that will help us inform what changes we might need to our facilities.
Okay. And kudos to Ray Walsh and Rob Mullane. They've been very responsive to has the needs changed from hour to hour. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Outhitt.
Thank you, Mayor, and Denise. Thank you to those that Laura Lee mentioned and others as well, and to you. Just going forward with the, just sort of continuing on where you were with Laura Lee, we're going to sort of be finding out what we can add and not add over the coming months as far as programs and sports and whatnot. But how are we going forward with the mowing? What if anything will people see different this year or not see any different? Because over the last few years we've tried to start the mowing season earlier because of the dandelions. We tried to add extra cuts to fields because we were having a lot of complaints, this sort of thing. So my first question is, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of changes on that front, but I'm just looking for some confirmation on what Joe resident and Joe user might see differently, if anything. And the second thing is, based on the information that we just received this afternoon, and you may not even have read it yet, will there be a PSA going out as normal, as usual, this afternoon, just updating people what we've heard from maybe this is a better question for Jacques, but what we've heard from Dr. Strang and how it's going to influence us over the weekend? Will somebody be working on that? Thank you.
So why don't I take that one first, and then I will basically tell you from mowing, pretty much nothing has changed. It's one of the few services it isn't, but I will ask Ray to jump in again because he's able to provide much more detail of that, of the timing.
He's the one I bother when we don't get mowed.
Yep,
so that's
exactly, as he should be. We will, as we have done, once we finish with council here, we'll go and see all of the details of the team is working on what the impact of the announcements are and what we need to communicate. Again, being, Friday afternoon on a long weekend, we'll have to ask for patience from the public as to any changes that we need to get done. We'll work to get done over the next number of days, but we'll certainly look to see what communication we need to send out. But Ray, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I appreciate that. I do realize you didn't have a lot of warning. I appreciate that. I realize you didn't have a lot of warning. Yeah, thank you for your help.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to comment on the councillor's question, no changes to the mowing program. In fact, it's already started. We're seeing a few areas that are still wet, however, but no impacts, no changes to the mowing program.
Thank you both. Have a good weekend, or try to anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is more of a question. One of the things that I'm interested in, I think it sort of fits here, but I don't know where it exactly applies, because most of the grants that are provided from the funds are, things that would normally fall into Denise's wheelhouse. When should we talk about our own district capital funds? Like that's in the capital piece.
I'm going to send that over to Jane.
Like, should we discuss that now as part of the kind of grant discussion we're having, or are we planning a specific session? Like, I know we've been pulling out the capital items one by one as we kind of come through the different directors' areas. But just wondering when we might want to address that, or if I should raise it now.
Jane or Jacques, thoughts on that?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. So as the budget schedule that we have currently, we do not have a specific capital day. What we have been doing is having each director answer the questions about capital at the same time as operating. We do have a recommended reduction on district capital of $750,000 in the capital sheet, so it could be saved for the end of the process, or it can be done at council's discretion. Jacques, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything to that or not.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll discuss it at that time.
Okay, so at the very end?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, if there's no other questions, I just want to make a comment, Denise, for myself. Some of the questions that were asked, I share an interest in. Summer camps and things like that, other organizations will be doing them, but I recognize the challenges that we have. One of the things I'm putting a lot of my thinking into these days is where can the municipality play a role in recovery? And one of those is with Discover Halifax, with the bids as well, and you know, with our main streets, so I just want to make sure that we're sensitive to the needs of Discover Halifax, who've done tremendous work, as you know, recently in their strategic planning, which has all kind of changed, but is now focused on COVID recovery and then continuing. So, but I think that's a discussion that we can have when Discover Halifax have done some of their work. But I certainly want to make sure that we're going to be a good partner for those folks when the time comes. So I don't see, and I don't know, I'm not asking for any comment unless you want to offer one.
No, I was just going to say, absolutely. We're in conversation with Ross, and I believe he's coming to one of the upcoming council meetings to give a bit of an overview of some of that work. So okay, absolutely, yeah. Okay. Going to be critical.
If anybody has been really hammered, folks, it is the tourism industry. It has been devastated. I don't know if you saw this week that the airport is operating at 2% capacity, and with all the stores that are closed and stuff, we're going to need to put a real focus this year on supporting our own local areas, and so I want to make sure we're a partner in that. Denise, I think that's it. I want to thank you. You may be in the dark this afternoon, but
I know, I can't believe how dark I am.
You bring light to us every day. I see Lisa just saying she'll be in the Discover Halifax board meeting. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, on that. It's all been said, Denise. We appreciate very much. I know how much your life changes on a dime these days, and probably has again. So
thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was much faster than I thought. I'm going to head off and go figure out a PSA.
All right.
So that we can find out what changed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you. So colleagues, we had a productive Friday afternoon. I appreciate everybody's indulgence and attention. We've probably covered more, I think, Jacques, than I expected. Good questions, good discussion. Maybe I'll just get who would, Cheryl or Laura, just to sort of take us through, or Jacques even tell us to take us through where we are. We have added a number of meetings to your calendars. I'm sure that they were delightful intrusions into your expected week, but we are trying to get through this work. There's been a number of meetings scheduled. The next one is on Tuesday afternoon. Yeah. Cheryl, do you just want to sort of run through a little bit on those?
Sure. So we had an already scheduled meeting for Tuesday the 19th in the afternoon. That begins at 1 o'clock. We added today, basically all day the 20th, and then a morning meeting on Thursday the 21st, and an afternoon meeting from 1 until 3 on Friday the 22nd.
And so those are only if needed. Councillor Hensby's asking about police. It will take I think Wednesday, Jacques is going to take some work with the two chiefs to come back. We're going to try to do that Wednesday. Wednesday morning, we're going to do our in-camera session. I wasn't sure, Cheryl, if you said that. Looking at the vacancy management and staffing situation.
Right.
So that's where we are, folks. I don't think there's anything else we need to do today. Tony, did you wish to say something?
Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, thank you very much. I just wanted to make an announcement for those that may be watching from Dartmouth North. We've had the Dartmouth North COVID-19 testing site open for the last couple of weeks, and the numbers are going down, which is a good thing. So Sunday will be the last day for the Dartmouth North testing site, and that's at the Dartmouth North Community Center, where the library is. Walk-ups are permitted. If you can, call 811 to make an appointment, but Sunday will be the last day at the end of the day. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, Jacques, through you to the council, if you don't mind, on Tuesday afternoon, we were planning on finishing up Parks and Rec, so thank you to the council for finishing that up today. That means that corporate and customer services will be in on Tuesday afternoon. We will likely advance some of the other business units into Thursday afternoon if we have time Thursday afternoon. So just give you that heads up. We may be able to bring others in. We would propose to maintain our in-camera conversation on Wednesday, but just advancing some of those others that were perhaps scheduled for Thursday. We might advance them to Tuesday. So thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Mayor, and Jacques hit on most of that. I'm just wondering, and maybe I've missed it, if we'll be getting a schedule of like when we anticipate the different business units will be coming in, what order, just so that we'll know on this end.
Yes.
Yeah, we will do that. We sent something out, but it's already changed. So
yeah, we'll send you a revised plan after I speak to the director.
Thank you. My apologies for missing it.
No worries. And on the vacancy management, that is the in-camera piece Wednesday morning.
Yes. Yeah, it's on the HR. Any HR questions you may have, we'll deal with in camera on Wednesday.
All right, colleagues.
Thank you very much.
Seeing no other questions, I thank you all. I hope you all have a wonderful. This is our second long weekend, and I say this to everybody who's watching as well. It's our second long weekend under COVID. We've been through Easter. We've been through part of Ramadan and some other holidays. Let's hope it's our last long weekend under COVID. Councillor Zarowski, you don't have to beep in. I'm just saying I hope. That's all.
Enjoy the beaches. Enjoy the beaches.
Thank you all very much. Have a glass of wine on me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you, folks. Good work.